Good morning, everyone. Joel Solomon here for PRS and the Roadmap. And today we're going to talk about how I input the Roadmap, our web-based planning suite for widow income, actually calculating how much insurance somebody needs, not only today, but perhaps how to maybe design a guaranteed universal life product longer term, or in an indexed universal life space, how we actually would reduce the death benefit over time to meet the anticipated changing needs and resources that the client has. So let's start from the basics. Here we are. I have a blank screen, as everybody can see. And you would go into your Internet Explorer. I like to use Safari. And you would go to Roadmap, right? So this is going to be your input. You click on the Roadmap. You get this screen, which is the welcome screen. I then click on Continue to Enter Roadmap Assumptions. Now I'm going to make the screen a little bit bigger so you can see I'm just kind of lengthening it, widening it, etc., by pulling on those corners. So what we're going to do is I entered a case in here. What you could do is you could start with client profile. You could add a new case. I pulled up a case that I call Bob Johnson. And Bob is 45 years of age, male, living in California. Of course, there's drop-down menus. And in order to run a widow planner, which is what we call it, widower, or how much insurance does somebody need, you've got to input the basic client information, what you have right here. The default, as I think all of you know, for retirement income is a $100,000 goal. This does not come into play when we use Widow Planner, but the system has to have something in place. So if you're doing this strictly for how much insurance, you're not doing retirement planning, just leave these defaults alone under client retirement income. Now, same thing under tax qualified plan assets and other retirement assets. If you know what the client's assets are, you can put them in here, it's fine. Again, here we've got tax qualified assets of $400,000, contributing $20,000 a year. Now that's going to mostly come into play, this $20,000 a year, if you were doing retirement planning. When you're doing widow income planning, the only thing that's going to matter is the current value. Because if he were to die today, the system's going to use the after-tax value of what he currently has as a resource to meet his widow income needs. Now for other assets, those are non-tax qualified assets earmarked for retirement. In this example, I put in $250,000. So save and continue, generate results, and what we get, of course, is the retirement planner output. Now again, I want to remind you, let's just suppose that all we care about here is widower income. So we're going to click on that tab. And what we get, I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. So what we get is widower income goals and assumptions. So the first thing we got to do is put in the age of the individual. And let's say that she was 43. And he says, I'd like to provide her with $100,000 a year of after-tax income through age 85. And I want to plan on 2.5% inflation, and that I can get 4%, or she can get 4% net after tax and investment expense on the assets I'm able to leave her if I die. Notice it says expected effective tax rate. So whatever rate you put in here, we have a default of 35%. This is going to be the tax rate applied to the qualified plan assets. So if somebody had $100,000 in an IRA, if you put in 35%, we're assuming that if he dies, $65,000 would be available to the spouse because you got to pay ordinary income tax on it. So when I first do this work, right, I want to show the client, how much capital that it's going to take to provide her with $100,000, adjusting for 2.5% inflation from 43 to age 85, assuming he can get 4% growth on assets. So I'm going to hit next. Now, when I hit next, what you can see here is that at age 43, he would need to have $3.2 million of capital growing at 4% to provide his wife with $100,000 a year adjusted for inflation all the way through age 85. Now, there's a scroll bar on the right-hand side, so you can go over to the right and scroll it down, but you might not get all the way to age 85 depending on how old. So you'd have to come back up here with your cursor, use your little scroll thing in your mouse, and you can actually move it up that way. So if I want to get back to the beginning, I come over here, grab my scroll bar, move it up, and so on. So we know that the client would need $3.2 million to make this happen if he were to die today. The reality is he's got assets, and he may have some other liabilities, and we want to take those into account. So we go back to assumptions, and we say, how much life insurance do you have? He says $1 million of term insurance. See how complicated these inputs are. But how much cash do you have in money in brokerage accounts, not in tax-qualified assets? And he says, I've got $250,000 in cash in brokerage accounts, and I've got $400,000 in IRAs, 401ks. Do you have an outstanding mortgage? Yep, $400,000. In fact, let's make that number different. Let's make it $500,000. How about college? Well, I'm not sure, but let's say I need $100,000 more to fund my kid's college. Any debts outstanding? Yeah, $50,000. Look at how simple the inputs are. Click on next. Now look at what happens. In order to take care of the family income goal of $100,000, adjusting for 2.5% inflation, and to pay off the mortgage, take care of college and miscellaneous debts of $650,000, and you see it comes in right here. Now he needs $3.8 million if he dies, growing at 4% to meet the family income goal and to take care of the debts. Now again, I'm moving my cursor up here and my little wheel on my mouse, and I'm moving it up, and I'm going to scroll this down. So there you can see, Mr. Client, by the time she's 80, she would actually need $249,000 to buy $100,000 of inflation-adjusted goods and services. Now, again, Mr. Client, using the scroll bar, of course, we need $3.8 million to meet the family income goal all the way to age 85, and nothing would be left at age 85. Now, then I scroll it back up. But Mr. Client, as we said, notice how I'm pointing to the $3.8 million. You need $3.8 million if you died today. So capital required to meet goal, $3.8 million. Less the amount of current assets that he has, which is $1.5 million, made up of the $1 million of insurance, the $250,000 of cash and brokerage accounts. Notice it says after tax value of qualified plans. That's the amount that he had less the 35% tax rate. So we've got $1.5 million of current assets. So you need $3.8 million. You've got $1.5 million. This means you would need $2.4 million more in insurance if you died today. Can you imagine having a tool like the Widower Income Planner that is this simple to use and quantify what somebody needs? Just that simple. Now, remember that in this example, net, we need $2.4 million. Look, if I went back in and the client says, you know, I really need to take care of her to age 90, and we didn't change anything else, and I hit next. What's really interesting is the 2.4 goes up to 2.6. Now, the other consideration, if you want to fool around with the amount that you need, What if I got a 5% rate of return on invested assets? Hit next. All of a sudden we're down to $2 million. So you can see these variables of how long do you supply the income, what's your inflation assumption, your rate of return assumption, can have a pretty big impact, pretty big swing on the additional amount of insurance you need. So let's go back again and let's make this age 85, right? And let's make our rate of return net after tax of 4%. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to recalculate. And again, there's my 2.4 million additional insurance that we need. Now, a couple things we can do. So we know right now we need 2.4 million of insurance. This isn't discussing what type of insurance. This is just the amount that you need. But the other cool thing you can do with it, you can go back into assumptions. Let's look at her 10 years later, 53 years of age. We're not changing the amount we want to give her. We're not changing how long we want to give it through. But now maybe over that 10-year period, now he's got $500,000 in his brokerage account, and the tax-qualified plan assets are up to $800,000. They've doubled. The mortgage is down to $350,000. We don't have any college expenses. They've all been taken care of, and let's assume no debt. So notice what we've done here. So this is our second go-round. So when I hit next, again, my goal has not changed, right? But what's really interesting about all of this is the amount of insurance I would need then is about $1 million. You don't want to make this an exact science, right? You really don't want to make it an exact science. So be careful here that you don't get crazy with, reducing the death benefit from 2.4 down to 970. That's a little bit over the top. This is just giving you a roadmap or a general idea how to use this. So that's how I use the widower planner. This is Joel Solomon of PRS in the Roadmap. And again, we're always here at the office to support you with any questions you have on any cases. Have a great day.